Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today. Look, we are going to be focusing on a massive, yet somehow often entirely unseen engine of our modern world. I'm talking about the industrial waste management sector. Specifically, we're going to dig into exactly how these massive waste fleets quantify their green energy transition. So, if you've ever wondered how investors or even regulators track the true environmental footprint of those massive heavy-duty trucks rolling down our streets, well, you are absolutely in the right place. We are going to decode the SAB waste management standards for fleet fuel management together and make all these complex accounting metrics crystal clear.
So I want you to start by just visualizing something for a second. Picture those heavy-duty garbage trucks navigating through your neighborhood. Got it? Okay, now multiply that by every single neighborhood in your city. And then scale that up across the entire country. We are literally talking about tens of thousands of massive vehicles firing up their engines every single morning. The sheer scale of fuel consumption required to just keep these fleets operational is, well, it's staggering. But here is the big question. How do you actually measure the environmental footprint of all that fuel? I mean, how do you know for sure if a company is genuinely transitioning to cleaner energy or if they're just, blowing smoke? That's exactly what we're going to figure out today.
All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the Fleet Fuel Challenge, then look at the SASB tracking dashboard, measuring total fuel consumed, breaking down fuel types, tracking alternative vehicles, and finally, wrap up with the bottom line for business. Let's dive right in.
Okay, Section 1, the Fleet Fuel Challenge.
To really appreciate why these reporting standards even matter in the first place, we have to grasp the immense expense that fuel represents for these companies. It's really a tale of two fleets. On one hand, you have your traditional fossil fuel fleets. Relying on fossil fuels creates massive operational expenses, or OPEX, and heavy capital expenditures. Plus, they carry high climate impacts, localized air pollution, and some pretty severe regulatory exposure. On the other hand, you've got cleaner fleets. Upgrading a fleet actively makes a company way more competitive when they're bidding on municipal contracts. It fosters a much better community perception, which at the end of the day effectively protects their vital license to operate in those areas.
Now, because of these enormous financial and environmental pressures, companies absolutely have to deploy strategies to manage their fleet fuel risks. A super common traditional tool in the industry is hedging fuel purchases, right? You lock in prices to manage financial volatility. But the SASB framework highlights that the industry trend is actively shifting away from just financial maneuvering. The real focus now is on actually upgrading to fuel-efficient vehicles and making an outright switch to cleaner-burning natural gas alternatives.
Moving on to Section 2, the SASB tracking dashboard.
So, how do we hold these massive companies accountable? We look at the ultimate dashboard that the investors use. Under the SASB topic for fleet fuel management, you'll find metrics IFWM 110B.1 and 110B.2. What's really brilliant about this standard is that it forces companies to abandon vague sustainability promises. Instead, they have to strictly quantify their fuel risk profile using specific, standardized units of measure. No more guesswork.
Which brings us to Section 3, measuring total fuel consumed.
How do you track the sheer volume of energy a sprawling fleet actually burns over the course of an entire year? The magic word here is gigajoules, or GJ. The standard explicitly mandates that companies must report their aggregate fleet fuel consumption in gigajoules. And here is a super critical detail to remember. This calculation has to be based on the actual fuel consumed by the vehicles. You can't just rely on theoretical design parameters or estimated miles per gallon. It is strictly about what is actually burned on the road.
To make sure nobody is just, guessing, the SASB standard outlines specific, acceptable methodologies for calculating this consumption. Honestly, one of the clearest ways is just pure hard inventory math. Step 1. Take your beginning fuel inventory at the start of the year and add every single fuel purchase made during the reporting period. Step 2. Subtract any fuel inventory that's just sitting left in the tanks at the end of the year. It's remarkably straightforward accounting, but it totally prevents companies from creatively estimating their way out of heavy emissions reporting.
But wait a second. How do you actually turn gallons of diesel or cubic feet of compressed gas into a universal unit like a gigajoule? Well, to convert physical fuel into gigajoules, the standard requires companies to consistently apply higher heating values, or HHV. Sometimes they're called gross calorific values. These are highly specific scientific conversion factors, often pulled directly from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It ensures all the reported energy data is rigorously standardized across the entire waste management industry.
All right, Section 4. Breaking down fuel types.
Okay, having the total gigajoules is great, but investors also need you to prove exactly what kind of fuel is running through those engines. So, the standard dictates that companies have to disclose the percentage of their total fuel consumed that comes from natural gas. It's simple math. You take the amount of natural gas consumed in gigajoules and divide it by the total fuel consumed. That single slice of the pie chart tells an investor instantly how far along a company is in transitioning away from dirtier, traditional petroleum products.
Next up, companies have to report the percentage of renewable fuel they consume. But what legally counts as renewable in this framework? The SASB standard doesn't mess around here. It lays out a strict three-part definition to completely shut down greenwashing. To be counted, the fuel must, number 1, be produced from renewable biomass. 2, it has to be used to replace or reduce the quantity of fossil fuel present. And 3, it must achieve a net greenhouse gas emissions reduction on a life cycle basis. All 3 boxes have to be checked for it to count.
And just like we saw with natural gas, companies have to perform a separate calculation for this metric. They take the total renewable fuel consumed in gigajoules. And remember, that's only fuel meeting that incredibly strict 3-part definition we just talked about. And they divide it by the total fuel consumed in gigajoules. Boom. This gives investors the exact percentage of the fleet powered by actual renewables.
Now, here is a really fascinating little detail that keeps the reporting incredibly honest. Companies can't just declare a fuel renewable on their own authority. Nope, the SASB standard explicitly demands that entities officially disclose the specific standard or regulation they are relying on to determine if a fuel is classified as renewable. This kind of radical transparency ensures that the data is firmly anchored in recognized regulatory frameworks and isn't just clever marketing spin.
Let's look at Section 5, Tracking Alternative Fuel Vehicles.
Here, we're shifting our focus away from the fuel itself and looking over to the physical hardware rolling down the street. Companies must disclose the percentage of their fleet that consists of alternative fuel vehicles. Again, straightforward math. You take the total number of alternative energy vehicles in the fleet and divide it by the total number of vehicles. This provides a clear, undeniable percentage of a company's real capital investment into cleaner hardware. Of course, the SASB framework provides a very specific roster of what actually counts as an alternative fuel vehicle. It includes vehicles powered by biodiesel, electricity, hydrogen, natural gas, and propane. But interestingly, it also explicitly includes advanced lean burn technology and hybrid electric vehicles. This really showcases the wide variety of engineering solutions that companies are allowed to utilize to reduce their overall petroleum consumption. It's a pretty diverse menu of options.
Finally, Section 6, the bottom line for business.
So, we've gone through all this math. But why do investors demand all this highly granular data? Well, tracking gigajoules, natural gas percentages, and alternative vehicles isn't just some feel-good environmental exercise. It is core business strategy. This data directly dictates who avoids future compliance costs from increasingly stringent climate regulations. It dictates who wins those massive, highly competitive municipal contracts. And above all, minimizing localized pollution protects a company's vital license to operate in the very communities they are serving. Which leaves us with this final, really critical thought to ponder. If a waste management company's fleet fuel data is completely opaque today, if they aren't properly tracking their gigajoules or modernizing their vehicles, what kind of hidden regulatory and financial risks are their investors unknowingly inheriting for tomorrow? The SASB standards ensure that these massive tailpipe liabilities are finally brought out of the shadows and placed right there on the dashboard for everyone to see. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking the hard questions, and I will see you next time.